Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. And first of all, thank you for your patience. As always with technology, it never actually goes well just when you want it to. So apologies for the delay. You've probably gathered, for those of you who've joined, we have had a couple of immediate technical issues. So one of our presenters has not yet been able to log in and access the call. Apologies for that, but without looking in any way flat, sorry for the delay. Thank you very much for joining. My name's Colin Patterson and I work for DriveTech. I'll go through some additional introductions in a little while, but thank you for coming for this webinar. It's the global language of road safety and why it matters, hosted by DriveTech, but we're delighted to have some guests with us and I'll introduce them in a second. In fact, you can probably, I hope, see them on the screen, but we're delighted to have Dr. Shaun Helman here from the TRL organisation, previously known as Transport Research Laboratory, and also Brian Nixon, who Brian is a customer of DriveTech's, and we're also delighted to have him with us. Brian is a health and environmental safety manager at AECOM, and I'll go on to explain a little bit more in a second. Okay, Joe, if you could maybe move on with the slides, and we can play a little bit of catch up. In terms of program today, just order of play, with maximum allowed an hour. I'm hoping that we'll go through the presentations from myself, Brian, Sean, and Madelon Janssen, if she can join us. We have this ongoing technical issue, but I think we've got plenty of other content to entertain us for the moment. We're going to record this presentation, so you should be aware of that. The main purpose is that we can then capture the recording and send it out to delegates post broadcast. So that hopefully will be useful to everybody on the call. We're launching a white paper this week called The Global Language of Road Safety and Why It Matters. And again, part of the send on to all of the delegates on this call is we'll issue that white paper to you in due course with the recording. In terms of facility, you're all as delegates on silent, but if you do see, I think normally to the right of your screen, there is a chat question type facility, and you can type happily and we'd welcome your questions. If you want to type a question, please do so. We're going to go through the presentations, but then we will allow time at the end if we've got it, and we've got questions from the delegates. I'll pose those questions to some of the panel. So, without any further ado, I think what we'll do is maybe go straight on with the next slide, Joe, please. I just wanted to summarise here very quickly the content of the white paper that we've just launched. Road safety globally, does it really matter? And I think hopefully some of you will be well versed with these figures, but road safety is still a big cause for concern globally. The World Health Organization records 1.35 million fatalities per year. And actually, there are estimates between 20 and 50 million people who also suffer non-fatal injuries. So the deaths alone are pretty tragic, but 20 to 50 million people with non-fatal injuries is also pretty horrific. On a European level, the European Transport Safety Council, ETSC, publish a regular PIN report, a performance index report, and that accounts for 22,660 people who lose their lives on EU roads, and that equates to about 436 deaths a week. That's actually, sadly, only a 3% decrease since 2018. So there is a significant problem. And Joe, if you maybe move on the slide, thank you. That picture, and I think in terms of visibility to the audience on this, is really useful. The pie charts are perhaps a little bit granular for you to see, but the deep green colour and the orange colour both account for drivers in powered vehicles, and the orange section are drivers or riders with 3- and 2-wheel powered vehicles. And what you can see is wherever you are in the world, the significant contribution to those road deaths is contributed to by drivers and riders. There are other populations, including pedestrians and cyclists, but there is still a significant problem. Thank you, Joe. I should have said, we talk about Joe, our mysterious man behind the scenes, but Joe is very kindly progressing the slides. In terms of road safety in the UK, a most recent provisional report talks about just under 1,800 deaths in 2019. So this is from the Department for Transport in the UK. That also documents 26,000 serious injuries, 153,000 casualties of all severities, and then just as an interesting twist, 56% of fatalities happen to occur on rural roads and 63% of casualties on urban. So although the nature of the casualties might be different and the road collisions, this is a common problem both in rural areas and urban. And one of the observations I've got is, in terms of a singular tragedy, like an aeroplane crash or a train crash, media and communication tends to flock around that and report it quite sensationally sometimes. And again, we come back to this sort of communication and language style, but why that sensationalization takes place, I guess there's some understandable nature of reporting going on. But when we present the statistics around road deaths and serious injuries, this is an enormous problem. Every driver counts. The impact of these driver casualties is enormous and is very well scaled. And yet it is interesting that people report on particular singular tragedies more so. We shouldn't let this deceive us. Road casualties and road deaths is a big issue. Okay, thank you, Joe. We at DriveTech talk about, we have a number of mnemonics, but one of them is driver behavior and attitude as simple as ABC? We talk about the three main components being attitude, behavior, and competency. And all three have to be prevalent in a very rich blend. We need everything to come together: attitudes of drivers, behavior of drivers, and their basic competency behind the wheel. Road safety, the language, advertising, some of the sort of sexy positioning of driving, carefree with the wind in your hair, we question that positioning. This is one of the most serious high-risk activities people typically perform in their everyday lives. And the message in context around driving, especially on business, should not be underestimated or devalued. At stake is reputation, repair costs, recharges, and maybe insurance, and of course remorse, because we've talked about the death rates. In terms of education and driver training, we do think it's vitally important, although I'll come on in a second to talk to Dr. Shaun Helman about other aspects perhaps. But we're keen to gain new insights, create awareness amongst drivers. Our desire is to coach, inform, engage rather than preach, because I think the educational message goes in more deeply and is ingrained in people's behaviour if we take the coaching, informing approach. And one of the questions, certainly there is a big debate around the safe system. It's, I think, born out of the Scandinavian countries, but the safe system of operation is something that looks across all aspects of road safety, from infrastructure, engineering, and on road. But we're focused particularly on safe humans, the people who actually control the vehicles. Thank you, Joe. What I wanted to do is, first of all, welcome Dr. Shaun Helman, who's been patiently quiet. Dr. Shaun, you're very welcome. We're delighted to have Shaun with us. Shaun is a chief scientist at TRL, as I say, previously known as the Transport Research Laboratory. Shaun, by trade, is a cognitive psychologist. He's been involved in researching road safety behaviour, working with this sphere for about 20 years or so. I'm sorry to age you, Shaun. He has a particular interest in the links between driver behaviour and safety outcomes. And in terms of our session with Shaun, we've agreed that I was going to ask Shaun a couple of questions, if that's okay. And Shaun, I wonder if you could maybe give us some responses to your views.
Yeah.
So
sure.
welcome first of all, and we're delighted to have you with us. Thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
If I can dive in, you know, in terms of businesses and the way they operate, what policies and practices do you believe help mitigate fleet risk?
So at the risk of slightly challenging what you said just now about safe humans are of course part of the issue, but in the work that we've done, certainly at TRL, looking at fleet risk, what we found is that really businesses need to think about this from a systems perspective. And so what I mean by that really is, don't just assume that you can train or educate your drivers and be done with it. That's never going to be enough by itself. So what I tend to recommend is think about all the parts of the safe system approach to road safety that you can control as a fleet. So that might be the vehicles you procure, the routes you choose, of course, the drivers, their attitudes and so on, and also crucially things like driving speeds. So yeah, it's a whole system approach, and actually, that in terms of specifics, what we tend to recommend is that companies have a policy that covers all of that, and then looks to effectively reduce exposure to risk. So one way in which you can do that, it depends on what your business is, but the first thing you can do is just reduce the amount of driving that people are doing. Now that only works, of course, if you're if it doesn't work for businesses who need to, for example, deliver goods to people. That driving is part of the job then. But if you've, for example, got a fleet of people who are just driving to meetings, try and reduce that activity. Get people to work remotely, like we're all really good at now, or get people to travel through different modes. And then really it's about cutting down the key risk factors, which tend to be time pressure, distraction, fatigued driving while tired. Now there aren't many interventions out there that are going to solve everything in one go, but I would recommend that you look for evidence-based interventions and look to address risk in all of those areas where possible.
Okay, thanks. Do you mind, just very quickly, I didn't perhaps give it due service, the SAFE system? Are you able to just summarize that in a couple of sentences?
Yeah, so it's really a philosophy that grew out of, well, it's a model that grew out of the Vision Zero philosophy, which, and what at its core, it states that we know that drivers, even the really well trained and really well educated and properly, the ones who are paying attention, those people will make mistakes. And what we should do, therefore, is design the system such that it doesn't result in death and serious injury every time somebody makes a mistake, or that, so really at its core, it is safe users in safe vehicles at safe speeds on safe roads with good post-crash care and good overall management of that whole system. That's really what it is at its core.
Fantastic, thanks. I mean, Vision Zero is something that keeps cropping up, and I'm finding increasingly people are referring to the SAFE system, and it sounds good, but I think it requires a little bit of explanation. So thank you for that. In terms of international business, so I think we have delegates here not only from the UK but also from international businesses. In your opinion, the businesses with sort of border crossing international enterprises, with fleets that bridge across countries, do they have to take a particular and maybe extra care in their driver risk management?
I mean, intuitively, you'd think so. I have to say I don't know a great deal about international comparisons, but yeah, I mean, driving is a cognitive task. It's a cognitive skill, right? So we would expect that period of time when people are adjusting to whatever road system they've come or gone from and the one they're coming to, that there are going to be opportunities there for people, again, to make those mistakes. So I'm guessing that's more a kind of a candidate for good driver induction, to make sure that if drivers are driving routes that cross borders, they're aware of the things that they need to look out for. And I guess, that's especially true when drivers are new to the job. Okay,
fantastic. Thank you. Do you mind if I ask another question? This is a bit global, I know, but does the picture for global road safety, we ran through some statistics, and I think European and UK in particular, I'm not sure about the world, but I reckon it's a parallel. They haven't changed dramatically in the last 10 years. So there hasn't been a dramatic reduction in road deaths or road casualties for 10 years or so. And technology, as I think we all know, has moved on. Do you think the picture for road safety globally is a good one? Are we heading in the right direction? Do we need to do things differently?
Well, we're demonstrably not heading in the right direction, as you've just said. But things have plateaued. There are odd countries that are showing some progress, but globally, no, we're still killing. What is it? 1.35 last year. It seems to be between 1.2 and 1.4 4 million people a year. So there's lots going on there. There are lots and lots of countries that are becoming more motorized, that are going to potentially learn from the lessons that some other countries that have gone through that motorization phase have learned, but we're clearly not investing enough money into, and time and effort into, solving this issue. I think this is one of humankind's blind spots, if you like. We just seem to have this way of thinking about it, that it's fine. People have to die in order for us to have freedom of movement around the world, and that to me seems one of the core issues here. We need to change. It's not so much the language we use about road safety, it's the sort of tone of our voice and our thinking. That's what I think.
Which is one of the, thank you for priming that. That's one of the points we were making about the language of road safety, but I think sometimes it's just apathy and a bit of slapdash approach to it. It's accepted, and yet the statistics just don't seem to bear out the fact that we should accept it. Okay. Here's a leading one, Sean, because we obviously DriveTech deliver driver training and driver risk management. So I don't want you to sell on our behalf. I don't think you will. How does driver training for business, in your opinion, contribute towards the overall positive outlook or improvements?
Yes, so those who have read things I've published on driver training will know that I remain unconvinced that training and education approaches are a direct route to safety. That's not to say they're not important, but I think in terms of what the research evidence shows us, it shows us that training and education on sort of safety tends not to have a direct impact on crash rates, certainly not just for on-road driving. My personal feeling is well, and I think the evidence in some way bears this out, is that any training and education that organizations sell into the market needs to be focused on culture, and it needs to be focused on that, well, it's going back to what we were saying before, that sort of system-wide approach. But also, if we're thinking about the language of road safety and the way we think about it, it's getting to a culture where people call out bad and unsafe acts, like speeding, not wearing seatbelts, whatever it is, call those things out as unacceptable, and that doesn't seem to happen for some reason. There's this blind spot, like I said, with road safety. Essentially, we need to spend a lot more time and effort improving this, because if we don't, it won't. And I don't quite understand why we don't spend that effort, because there are plenty of other areas of life where we do. So yeah, look, training is probably a part of the overall solution. I'm not going to comment on any particular training solution unless I'm reading a research paper on it, but it's part of the solution, not the whole solution.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Sean, thank you very much for those, that sort of Q&A approach style. Thank you for answering the questions. By the way, just before I hand over to Brian, and we'll maybe move the slides on, I just wanted to say to all the delegates, you may or may not have seen, and you may share my joy, we do have a fourth member of the panel arriving. Hopefully you can see Madelon, who is smiling and looking relaxed after quite evidently some technical difficulties. Madelon, welcome, and I'll introduce you in a little while, a little bit more formally, but I'm hoping everyone, I'm certainly relieved to see you, and I'm hoping the delegates and the fellow panelists are too. So welcome, Madelon. Okay, thank you, Joe. If you could maybe progress the slides, that would be terrific. What I wanted to do now is just welcome Brian again, Brian Nixon from AECOM. I don't want to big him up too much, but he is a customer, so we have to be careful with this one. But Brian, you're very welcome, and thank you for giving up the time to join us. Brian, in my opinion, I looked at his LinkedIn profile and he's told me not to big him up, but he's a massively experienced health and safety and environmental manager. And at AECOM is working on multi-million-pound private and public sector projects a lot of the time. So I don't know why he's looking so relaxed, but he is. And just in case customers don't know, delegates don't know, and I know that Brian will cover this in a little bit more detail than I might, AECOM is the world's premier infrastructure and engineering consulting firm with approximately, I think, more than 80,000 employees worldwide. So this is not an insignificant business. Brian, thank you for coming, and I should hand over the baton to you to take us through your presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Colin, for the introduction. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this webinar today. As you can see from the first slide, as Colin's already said, my name is Brian Nixon, Group Health and Safety Manager for AECOM, a large American infrastructure company. I'd like to give you a quick short demonstration of what we do with regards to driver training under AECOM. A bit about AECOM in the first instance. We're obviously a global infrastructure consulting firm covering all the major design disciplines. In February this year, we've been ranked #1 as a most admired company by Fortune magazine for the industry sector that we're in. We do have a client base of approximately within 150 countries with circa 87,000 staff worldwide. And within the UK, we employ 7,000 staff, of which 4,000 are mobile. So just more than half of our staff are required to drive on company business. And that'll fit in quite nicely with what Colin's introductions and Dr. Shaun's commentary have been around company responsibilities around duty of care. Driving on company business for AECOM is regarded as quite a significant risk, and the most major one that we have with regards to our employees for the type of activities we undertake. We do have a duty of care and the legal responsibilities, which we must undertake, especially within the UK under the Health and Safety at Work Act, and I'm sure within the countries or regions that you're in, you've got your own specific health and safety legislation that you must maintain. In 2018, we adopted DriveTech as our fleet risk manager system to help us address these risks, and we've been working with them ever since. So we're doing really well in partnership. Next slide, please. DriveTech fleet risk management system. I find it's more like a one-stop shop. It's an integrated package. It's a system which, from user intervention from a new start point of view, allows us to load all their information with regards to driving licenses, vehicle details if they are using their own vehicles. We'll come on to that around grey fleet in a moment. It also enables digital checking of records in the UK through the DVLA, that's the Driver Vehicle Licence Authority, which is a big bonus because it comes back in literally seconds. So for us, it's a great help to ensure our drivers are legally compliant on the roads. It does have a risk profiling system which we've built to ensure that we are looking out for high-risk drivers. So that is drivers who are under 21, high mileage, which in the UK would equate to 12,000 business miles or approximately 20,000 kilometres within European and more global areas. We're also interested in whether our drivers are experienced on the road. So if they've got less than 12 months experience, we want to know and have that highlighted. That also leads into training packages with regards to either e-learning or on-road training. Part of the system also allows us to do a driver risk assessment. So again, that's hazard perception against risks. So that's delivered through the package from DriveTech via a virtual driving medium. So again, they have an opportunity to go through a number of different scenarios, and they're marked against the hazard and risk. From that, we can also get additional e-learning to assist our drivers to give them additional competences and awareness of certain circumstances that they may face on the road. Again, we're mentioning there, we do have an on-road training that DriveTech provide us with, which again, any high-risk drivers that are under 21 are required to undertake. Again, that's taken hands-on, face-to-face with a competent assessor from the business who takes them through, and we've had some very positive results from that. It also highlights on occasions where we have some drivers who have got less experience, and then we will work with DriveTech to build a course of a few more assessments to build their confidence and ability to be on the road. So again, it's about the duty of care, not only to the individual, to the business, but to the wider community and drivers that are out there. Obviously, the system does allow us to store a history of learnings for each employee. So again, we've got a virtual record of everything that goes on with the driver, from onboarding all the way through to assessment and any particular actions with regards to licenses and point scoring within the UK. We do get management reporting out of the system, which again is used intensively and also helps us with accreditations. So within the UK, there's something called the Fleet Operators Registration Scheme, especially around the London area, which all big fleets have to be party to. That's got a requirement in there that needs to have 6 monthly checks, and again the system allows us to do this digitally and allows us to report and be able to be in compliance with that particular accreditation scheme. Once all of the above elements are in place, and that normally doesn't take very long, to be honest, we issue our drivers with a permit to drive in the UK only. Next slide, please. So within our driver fleets, we operate predominantly in two areas. One is what we refer to as owner driver, or as some people on the call will appreciate, is something called grey fleet. So that's when our drivers can use either their personal vehicles or can have hire vehicles. We have another designation called assigned drivers, which allows them to use hire vehicles only. And again, the assigned drivers when involved with our operational fleet. So we have a fleet based out of one of our offices, which is on the roads doing geotechnical investigations. They're all assigned drivers as well. But again, those particular drivers have got to be aligned to training, and they get additional training through the system for the use of long wheelbase vans and for towing trailers as well, which is again delivered through the DriveTech portal and mechanisms. Next slide, please. Some of the benefits we found from the fleet risk management, as we said previously, enables AECOM to demonstrate our duty of care, not only to the individuals, but also ensures AECOM are fully compliant, but also means that we can effectively have our drivers on the road and be comfortable that they're legal and as competent as possibly can be. It is an efficient and effective management tool. It doesn't take much interaction to keep everybody spinning the wheels, you might say. So it's efficient from a business point of view, from an organizational point of view. As I mentioned, it's also a one-stop shop for our training for all our company drivers. Previously, we had a fragmented approach of license checking and then going to another party for driver training and also another party for e-learning modules. So this brings it all under one banner and keeps it a more controlled and effective mechanism. Gives us a consistent training approach from a renowned partner, both online and on road. The training materials are regularly updated. Last year we had 24 new modules added, which some included motorway driving. And just as an anecdote to that, we have had, and I'm sure a lot of the organisations present have had incidents where drivers have unfortunately had incidents when they're out on the road, be it motorway, A-class or rural. This is specifically more to the UK's way of looking at it. I've investigated a few of these incidents, and unfortunately, some of the comments that were referred to by Dr. Shaun around fatigue are one of the items that keeps cropping up. A lot of our drivers do have to drive at night. So again, that comes into potential sleep deprivation. One example would be more recently, I investigated a team that was returning from an overnight piece of work. They were driving up one of the motorways, going back home from London to Birmingham in the UK. He was travelling circa 60-65 mile an hour on the 70 mile an hour road. Driver had been awake and obviously doing his normal activities for the nighttime piece of work. He started to take a micro nap or sleep, and he actually fell asleep at the wheel while he was travelling up this road. Fortunately, there was a passenger in this vehicle, and this was pre-COVID days, and he realised that the driver had lost control slightly, managed to put his hand on the steering wheel to bring it back under control as it had started to veer into lane 3. This was at night. Fortunately, there was no other traffic on the road, otherwise that could have been quite significant and quite unfortunate circumstances. And he was heading for the central reservation, which if he'd impacted that at 60-65 mile an hour, that would have been a severe crash and potentially severe injuries or even fatalities. That individual was able to bring the vehicle safely under control on the hard shoulder. They swapped drivers over. They went another few miles up the road, took a break at the services that were available, and then proceeded to get back to their location safely, I'm glad to add. It highlights the fact that driving at this time of the year or any time of the year is dangerous. It is a high risk activity. things can suddenly go wrong, and you can unfortunately have some serious effects, which unfortunately can be fatal as well. Fatigue's a big one for us. So again, within these modules, there's a fatigue module in there which highlights the sort of symptoms and attitudes and things that can go wrong under those circumstances. All our high-risk drivers, as I mentioned, do receive on-road training and assessment. Another one of the benefits that we see from this is, at the end of the day, it saves lives. It's also got a potential for reductions around damage and repair costs, which then is pounds or currency in your pocket with regards to your bottom line and repair costs, because you can effectively manage your fleet in a more timely manner and reduce any of your downtime. Next slide, please. Moving forward from AECOM's perspective, we're obviously looking to roll out additional e-learning modules within the UK and I, which is UK, United Kingdom and Ireland, around managing motorway risks. Again, we have a lot of colleagues running up and down the motorways within the UK. Again, mentioning around vehicle safety checks. Again, that's an area that I don't think is well looked or managed on occasions. The vehicles themselves, they need to be checked. They need to be ensured that they're safe, and we need to be able to demonstrate that we're giving them the training to show how they can do this properly. Managing rural driving risks, again, another one we're looking to roll out. We do have a number of colleagues that do have to go up into the Highlands and Islands, especially up into the Scotland areas, and there is a lot of driving on rural roads, and that brings with it different types of risks for the drivers. Narrow roads, still the same size vehicles coming in the opposite direction, as well as the hedgerows or the stone walls are so much closer, and therefore you can have an incident without really trying very hard. Looking to make sure that our enrolment of our new starters is reduced down to about a week, first week or second week of them being part of the business. Looking massively about integrated digital linkages between the systems. We have some good linkages now, but we're wanting to look to put our HR systems and finance systems so it's a much smoother and linked up process. We use our finance system with regards to our grey fleets and owner drivers, and also to check in on mileages. So that's a big one to ensure that that works end to end. And Madeline will be pleased to know that we're hopefully looking to roll this out into our European offices. Again, we've had similar instances with drivers and driver fatigue on motorways, so it's something around behaviour-based safety that we want to be looking at to move that forward. Obviously, the online training risk assessment, which also includes the e-learning bundles, is where we want to be, as well as the on-road training for high-risk drivers. So again, if that goes into Europe, hopefully, that will be language driven as well into the particular country. So that's going to be a big bonus to all our colleagues in the European offices area. Next slide, please. And that's the end of my very brief presentation, Colin. Hopefully I can hand it back to you and pass it on. Thank you very much indeed for your time and attention.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian, very much for that insight, which is really useful. We have got a couple of questions coming through, so I'll hold them for the time being. What I wanted to do, the good news is, as I mentioned, you can see Madelon, our colleague from DriveTech, has joined us, so welcome, Madelon. The bad news is, Madelon, we had a bit of a technical hiccup, as you well know, so we're a little bit tighter for time than we might have been, but I'm going to hand over to Madelon. Thank you for joining us, Madelon. Madelon is our DriveTech International Business Development Manager. He deals with our international clients and faces a whole range of challenges about road safety across business and across borders. So, Madelon, over to you to maybe give us an overview of your area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin, and I'm very pleased that I have been able to join. It wasn't me. I had some difficulties, but here I am. You haven't got rid of me yet, so I won't hopefully take up too much of your time. And also, as already Colin has said, I won't be too salesy, so it's not to aim too much at sales. I'm responsible for global sales, but this is more an informative session. So here we go. Next slide, please, Joe. Thank you. So you already looked at the global statistics with Colin, so I'm not going to go into much of a repetition of that. But what I would like to point out that it is estimated that work-related incidents make up to a quarter or a third of the total road toll, and even rising to 50% if commuting is included. Well, that's staggering. I mean, people are just doing their job and nobody thinks of it. You just go in the car and you drive to work, or you drive to your clients, or as a service technician, you go to the calls that you need to do for service. And nobody thinks of it that it's actually a very dangerous activity. And if you see the numbers, 1.35 million a year. This includes, of course, also pedestrians, but vehicles make up a big vehicle-related incidents make up a big chunk of this figure. And normally, if a plane comes down in the press, it's big news. But because there are incidental accidents or where few people are involved, it's not really that measure brought out in the news. So people have actually no idea how big the numbers are, and every driver counts. It's really, really sad. Next slide, please, Joe. If we go and look at the European Transport Safety Council numbers, and by the way, these reports are from 2018, 2020, but they are the latest figures available. In the European Union, 40% of those deaths are work-related, so even more, because people use their car more often, of course, in Europe. And this number has not really fallen despite all the measures that governments and employers have been taking, and only because of COVID-19 numbers have dropped in Q3. There are no later numbers available, so I cannot update you on Q4 or the first numbers of this year. But clearly we need to step up to tackle these numbers and the work-related road risks. Next slide, please. So if you look at the world's riskiest jobs, I normally present at HSC conferences, but lately I've not been able to do that, unfortunately, so I'm very pleased I can do it here. And thank you also for your time and joining us, by the way. I asked what are the world's riskiest jobs, and normally coal mining is there and construction. Deep sea fishing is not often thought of, but if you look at number 3, test driving for work, that's amazing. Nobody thinks of that. There's a little note, of course, that if you drive a lot of kilometers or miles for work, of course, this will heighten your exposure, but it is nevertheless number 3 most dangerous job in the world. So again, nobody thinks of it as being dangerous, but it is. Next slide, Joe, please. So what are the benefits of global driver safety management? Well, there's 3: people, profit, and planet. I should say planet before profit, sorry. Being salesy here. But the benefits are obvious, and people think, yeah, I have to invest in it. But you comply with health and safety legislation, especially in the UK, that's quite stringent. Outside the UK, there's still a duty of care for all employers to make sure that your employees can do their job safely and make sure they have the right tools, i.e. a safe car, and the right training, i.e. driver training available, so that they can safely do their job. For large plants, there are evacuation procedures, peer-to-peer observations, and that's all in place, but people often forget about the driver who is out there on his or her own in the car. And because it's out of sight, it's often out of mind. But then again, when the annual report comes in, the figures of the fatalities do not stem from the plants, they stem from the road fatalities. So that's something that we really need to tackle. Of course, when you invest in training, it also will have a return on investment in the sense of cost savings. It will give you less damages because there are less accidents, lower insurance premiums, less fuel consumption. And of course, less fuel consumption will also lead again to less CO2 emissions, which will be good for the planet. And of course, your demonstrate your compliance with corporate social responsibility. Next slide, please, Joe. So a bit more about DriveTech International. We are a specialist in developing and implementing international driver safety programs. This is our bread and butter. This is all we do, so we better be good at it, otherwise we're out of a job. Simple as that. So we are the only one who can provide online and on-road training on a true global scale, not just regional or local or in a country. And what's very important is that we use behavioral and research-based training products as the basis. As you already saw in the beginning, it's about attitude, behavior, and competence. So this is at the core of all our products. And we can do this in 95 countries and 35 languages at present. And all the dark gray countries you can see at the bottom of the slide are the areas we can cover. Next slide, Joe, please. Keeping an eye on the time. So when I present at the conference, I usually ask for hands and say, okay, who of you think that they're a pretty good or better than average driver? And I usually get about 90% of hands. Then I ask the second question, which is, do you think that the other drivers on the road are pretty competent or better than average drivers? I usually get 5 hands, 1%. And isn't that funny? So we all think that we are very good drivers, so we should all be good then. But then again, all the other people think we're not good drivers. So there is something in the mind here that tells us that maybe we should have another look at ourselves, because if you look at the figures, 90% of all traffic accidents happen because of human behavior. So this is error, omission, or interaction, reaction. And these are the causes for accidents, not technical failure. No, it is how we behave behind the wheel. Even though the cars are very safe, is our behavior safe? That's the question we should ask. And the factors that we look at are frustrations of other drivers, fatigue, as Brian mentioned, is a very dangerous factor as well. Mobile phone use, of course, we all know that one, speeding, other distractions. So these all are causes for the most common accidents. And how can we help our drivers to stay safe from these situations and create awareness? And if you look at drivers, I'm a different driver from you, you are different from me, and also your points of improvement are different from me or you. But so you cannot have one size fits all training. It doesn't work, you know. So we need to look at each individual driver and then see how we can help them. Next slide, please, Joe. And how do we do that? Is we use online driver assessments to map the behavioral situational risk of drivers. And that's then followed by online training, be it e-learning or webinars. And for the high risk, we definitely recommend on-road training with a coach, because that's personal coaching. And that is also monitored online via our management information system. And it's quite funny because we all take tennis lessons or skiing lessons, but we never take driver lessons again. And that's strange if we want to keep our skills. Next slide, Joe, please. So what would a typical training approach look like? So we start with the driver risk assessments. You can map the individual risk, potential risk of a driver upfront. So not as a reaction to accidents they already had, but are they high potential risk to become involved in an accident, or medium or low. It doesn't mean that they're a bad driver if they're high potential risk. It means that they have a high exposure to risk. That can be because of age, as Brian mentioned, under 21 or under 25 is a higher risk than a medium age driver. And it can be the number of miles or kilometers they drive. It's also high exposure, but predominantly it's their behavior. So when you do the driver risk assessments, you can map your fleet risk across the countries. So you can see how many high and medium risk, low risk drivers you have. And you can also have the 6 safe e-learning modules with them. So you have the basic training already in place for these people, for all of your drivers. Then for the high risk drivers, we recommend, as I just mentioned, the on-road driver training. And that is then performed with a coach and 2 drivers. And it gives them a driver performance assessment to point out the points of improvements, which they can put in a personal development plan. And to keep up awareness for all your drivers, or just the online training, we have also 17 standalone e-learning modules with different topics to train your drivers. And you can pick and choose any of them that you like. Again, monitored through our system. Yeah, no, that's fine. Thanks, Joe. One step ahead of me. So how does that work in reality? So one case study we have is AstraZeneca. They have worked with DriveTech since 2013, and they call that their Drive Success program, which is based on our fleet risk management program. It's a holistic approach, just like the schedule I just showed you before, so I won't go through that, but the results are important to see that collisions per annum are now half the global target of 5 collisions per million kilometers driven. I did check, it is not miles, it is kilometers. The number of injuries per annum have reduced, the percentage of blameworthy claims, and also staff feels more that they're supported by demonstrating the company cares. You know, you are our human asset. We want you to come home safe at night. It's a very, very important message that the leadership can also convey with this training. Thank you, Joe. Next slide. If you want to establish a driver safety culture, we mentioned culture before, you need to commit to road safety from top down. The message from the management team is extremely important for the success of the program. It really makes or breaks that. And you can read all the steps yourself. I'll try to save some time here, but leading by example is very important. Identify the risk, target key drivers, as I just pointed out. And point 7, regular communication, is also the theme of a white paper how a business communicates road safety to its employees has a direct impact on how they behave. So it's really a powerful message to help reduce those staggering numbers. Thanks, Joe. Next one. This is my last slide. So it comes all back to the pertinent message. Road deaths and injuries are not inevitable, so we can do something about that. And the language and how we communicate with other road users is really important. And I do not mean that behind the wheel, because please try not to do that, because that can sometimes lead to road rage. But how we communicate road safety and the impact that you as a driver, every driver has on road safety is very important. So the employers play a very, very potential important role in conveying this message, and it needs to make the driver realize that they are responsible for not for their own safety only, but also for the safety of the other road users. And we need to create ownership and responsibility to really change behavior going forward. Thanks, Joe. Next slide. So thank you all very much for your time. I'm very glad I could join. And I'll try to leave some time for questions. So over to you, Colin. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Madelon. You're probably conscious Madelon raced through that a little bit faster than perhaps she might have been expected to, but thank you for that. I make it about 7 minutes to go. There are 1,500 hours or 1,600 hours if you're in Europe. Stop. We have had some questions through, so if it's okay, I'm glancing down to my script here, but one for you, Brian, if that's okay. So thank you, delegates. You've asked a few questions. Brian, you mentioned your pool of drivers and fleet, and you mentioned younger drivers and experienced drivers. And one of the questions is from your experience in your fleet, is there evidence that suggests drivers under the age of, say, 21, 22, are they a bigger risk, do you find?
I think anecdotally it's been highlighted, and I think insurance information also highlights the fact that under 21s or in cases under 25s can be a potential risk on the road. We have had the experience of younger drivers being involved in incidents, so that's not saying that all young drivers are, because there is some very good ones out there. But yes, we have had past experience of younger drivers needing additional coaching, support and guidance, which obviously we can get through the systems, both either e-learning or hands-on. That's why we put them through those hands-on sessions to ensure that they are competent to be on the road, driving on behalf of the AECOM. And also not only for themselves but also all other road users, exactly along the lines of what Madeline's saying about are the road users good or are we good? We want to try and make our drivers as best as possibly we can.
Okay, thank you. One for Dr. Shaun Helman. Sean, I know you didn't create this rule, but I think we've observed generally that road speeds, maximum speeds are being reduced. So there was a question you may at least be able to comment on. Do you know what science was behind the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit? I'm talking about UK roads, but 20 mile an hour versus what was a 30 mile an hour. And why is there no 25 or 15 mile an hour? Do you have an opinion?
I can't answer the question as to why there's no 25 or 15, but the science behind 20 is that if you can get traffic speeds down to that, then you massively reduce the risk of injury to pedestrians, especially when you inevitably have collisions between them and cars. So quite, substantial reduction in injury severity.
Okay, fantastic. I have some other questions coming through. Brian, back to you if it's okay, and I'm going fast. Grey fleet, you mentioned grey fleet, which just in case delegates don't understand, that's where people own their own vehicle but use it for business. Do you find that's increasing?
Yeah, we always had a grey fleet number pre-COVID, but since COVID there's been a large increase in people wanting to use their own vehicles on company business. Therefore, we have to ensure we've got the insurance, the MOT, the tax. So yes, the grey fleet's gone up massively. And, I would say it's gone up by at least 2/3 of our fleet operators, our drivers rather. They feel safe under COVID conditions that they're using their own vehicle. They've got their own controls. So therefore, that's why the increase has gone grey fleet as opposed to higher vehicles that we have predominantly used in the past.
Okay. And do you address the needs of grey fleet, massively differently, or do you try and just treat them all the same?
Great Fleet's looked at. Obviously, we've got the additional requirements around vehicle details. We ensure that the vehicles are roadworthy, MOT'd, the annual checks. Again, we've got checks going on in the background with regards to that, with regards to the system. We check the insurance to make sure that the drivers have got business use cover, so they've got the right level of cover of insurance for being on the road. So if they are driving on company business, and if they are involved in an incident, that they are A, covered themselves, and B, the insurers will not try to say that they're not covered, therefore they won't have a claim, and therefore the other parties involved will also be remunerated under the circumstances. Yeah, we have to do additional checks for the grey fleet, so it is a large part of the checking process that goes on.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Shaun, again, I'm leaving you out, Madeline, I do apologise, but COVID, we can't finish the webinar without mentioning it, but certainly, again, looking at UK, there was a reduction in general road traffic, but we saw some prevalence of speeding, some quite extreme reports of speeding. Do you have any views about behaviour and attitude? What was going on there?
People speed for a variety of reasons. We know that one of the major categories of reason is that just having the opportunity to choose slightly higher speeds than they normally would. So I think most people are of the opinion that the increased speeding we saw in the first lockdown certainly was down to more opportunity for those people who either wanted to just behave completely ridiculously or were just happy to be a bit, a bit faster than they would normally drive. So yeah, I mean, look, another key thing for fleets to think about is the way their policies control speed, because speed is a key risk for work-related driving. So that's a pertinent message. Okay,
fantastic. Thank you. I'm conscious of time. It's now 14:59 or 15:59 if you're in Europe. So we said we'd finish at the hour. Thank you very much for the panelists who participated today. I think the questions, there are a few more, but what I think this tells me is we maybe run another webinar in another couple of months' time. Joe very kindly has put up a piece of publicity around our next white paper, which we will issue shortly. So thank you very much for listening. I mentioned at the beginning the recording is, this webinar has been recorded. What we propose to do is send this out to you all and make sure that you all get a copy of the new white paper we've produced. And as I say, it's really just left for me to thank the panelists. Thank you, delegates, for joining. And I think at that point, we will close the webinar. Apologies for the hitches at the beginning. If you do need to contact us, and Madeline put some details up a bit earlier, but generally, if you want to talk to us or communicate in any way, please make a note of that email address at the bottom or visit us on drivetech.co.uk. Thanks again for everyone's participation, and have a great and safe rest of the day.